The first light of autumn crept gently across the forest, slipping through gaps in the canopy like shy fingers of gold. It touched the dew resting on the leaves, painting every droplet into a tiny prism of morning. A soft breeze stirred, and with it came the earthy perfume of pine needles, damp soil, and fading wildflowers. Hope stirred beneath her blanket of leaves and wool, her breath forming pale clouds in the crisp air. The forest didn't wake with noise, it woke with rhythm. A slow, graceful rhythm that seemed to hum beneath the surface of everything. Hope lay still for a moment, her cheek pressed against the mossy ground, eyes half open to the dappled light above her. She had forgotten how quiet a place could be. No engines, no voices, no hum of electricity. Only the soft pulse of nature, the distant murmur of a brook, the muted flutter of wings, the rustle of some small creature passing through the underbrush. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full of life, full of peace. When she finally sat up, her hair tangled with fallen leaves, she smiled at the sight before her. The forest stretched endlessly, each tree wrapped in shades of amber and bronze. The morning sun filtered through them, breaking into shafts of light that danced over the ground. For a fleeting moment, she thought of how far she'd come, not in miles, but in spirit. The world she'd left behind seemed like a dream now. The screens, the noise, the constant race that had left her exhausted in every possible way. Here, there were no expectations. Only the slow passage of time, measured by wind and sunlight. She reached for her small leather journal lying beside her bedroll. The edges were worn, the pages smudged with dirt and fingerprints from long days of travel. She opened it to the last entry, written in hurried ink 2 days ago, "Find peace in the stillness. Stop running." Beneath it, she had drawn a rough sketch of the trees that surrounded her camp. Now, seeing them again, she realized how much softer they looked in the morning light. Hope closed the book and leaned back on her elbows, breathing deeply. The forest felt alive around her, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like an intruder. A family of tiny birds chirped in the branches above, hopping from limb to limb. A squirrel chattered indignantly from a nearby log, scolding her for daring to wake late. Hope laughed softly. "Don't worry," she murmured, "I'm just passing through." Beside her lay a small canvas pack, her whole life condensed into one bag. Inside were a few essentials: a half loaf of bread, a flask of water, a map, a pocketknife, and a photograph of her parents smiling in the summer sun years ago. They had loved the forest too. Her father used to say that the woods could heal anything if you gave them time. Back then, she'd thought it was just one of his poetic sayings. But now, sitting here with the earth beneath her and the sky stretching forever above, she felt the truth of it settling in her bones. She stood slowly, brushing leaves from her clothes, and stretched. Her muscles ached pleasantly from days of walking. Around her, the light grew stronger, each golden ray a reminder that another day had begun. But Hope had no destination in mind. Today wasn't for miles or progress. It was for breathing, for seeing, for feeling alive again. She wandered down to the stream a few yards away. The water was clear, flowing lazily over smooth stones, catching flashes of sunlight like liquid glass. She knelt and dipped her fingers in, gasping at the chill before letting her palm rest just beneath the surface. The ripples spread outward in slow, widening circles. Each ring that drifted across the water felt like a release, carrying away a piece of the weight she had carried for so long. For several minutes, she just sat there, watching. The reflection of the trees shimmered in the current, their fiery leaves trembling in the ripples she made. A dragonfly hovered above the surface, wings glinting like polished copper. Hope smiled, tracing a line in the water with her fingertip. "You don't have to hurry," she whispered, though whether she was speaking to herself or the stream, she couldn't tell. When a breeze swept through the forest, scattering a handful of leaves across the stream, Hope leaned back and closed her eyes. She felt the sun warm her face and the earth hum faintly beneath her palms. The world was moving, yes, but slowly, beautifully slowly. It struck her then that the forest didn't demand anything of her. It didn't care about who she was, or what she had failed to do. It simply existed, and it invited her to do the same. And for the first time in years, Hope accepted that invitation. She took a deep breath, smiled at the golden light flickering through the trees, and whispered, "Maybe I'll stay a little longer." By midday, the forest had transformed into a world of shifting light and gentle movement. The golden glow of morning had deepened into a warm amber haze, the kind that made everything look softer, dreamlike. Hope moved slowly through it, her boots crunching against the carpet of fallen leaves. Every step released a faint, papery whisper, like the forest was telling stories beneath her feet. She carried no map today. Instead, she let her instincts guide her, or perhaps it was the quiet invitation of the woods themselves. The trees seemed to lean in different directions, opening hidden paths that called her forward. Sunlight filtered through their branches, forming dappled trails that led her deeper into the unknown. There was no fear in her, only curiosity. For the first time in months, her heart wasn't racing to keep up with time. It was content to match the slow pulse of the earth. The forest had its own kind of language, and Hope was beginning to learn it. She could hear it in the creak of branches above her head, the soft sigh of wind brushing through the leaves, and the distant gurgle of water that hinted at a stream nearby. When she passed a patch of wild mushrooms, she crouched to look closer. Their caps were small and round, glowing faintly in the shade. Everything here seemed alive in its own quiet rhythm. A few steps farther, she found a deer standing in a shaft of sunlight. Its fur shimmered bronze, matching the color of the season itself. The creature lifted its head, met her eyes for a long, breathless moment, and then, without alarm, stepped gracefully into the trees and vanished. Hope stood frozen, her lips parted in awe. It was as if the forest had allowed her a glimpse of its soul, fleeting but unforgettable. The air grew cooler as she continued. The canopy thickened, muting the sunlight until the world turned dim and hushed. Eventually, she came upon a small clearing, a circle of grass surrounded by tall, ancient trees. At the center stood an oak so large its trunk looked as wide as a room. Its bark was dark and wrinkled like time-worn skin, and its roots spread outward in thick, twisting veins. The ground beneath it was littered with acorns and fallen leaves, forming a soft, golden bed. Hope felt something stir in her chest, recognition, maybe, or gratitude. She walked toward the oak and placed her palm against its bark. The surface was rough, cool, and alive. She closed her eyes and felt the faint vibration within, not sound, but presence. A living thing that had stood here through storms and seasons, through centuries of sun and frost. "You've seen everything," she whispered, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though the tree breathed with her. She sank down beneath it, letting her back rest against the trunk. Above her, the leaves moved slowly in the wind, sending down flickers of golden green light. Hope tilted her head back and stared upward, tracing the web of branches that reached toward the sky. It felt like sitting beneath an ancient cathedral made of living wood. Her thoughts drifted, as thoughts often do in the quiet. She thought about the city she had left behind, the tiny apartment that always smelled faintly of coffee and electricity, the endless chatter of people rushing from one place to another. Her phone had been her constant companion, glowing with reminders, news, and noise. But here, she hadn't looked at it once. She hadn't even felt the urge. Out here, time wasn't something to chase. It was something to sit with. A squirrel appeared suddenly on a nearby branch, twitching its tail and chattering noisily at her. Hope laughed, startled by the sound. "You're bold," she said, tossing a small crumb of bread onto the ground. The squirrel darted down, grabbed it, and disappeared in a blur of fur and energy. The brief encounter left her smiling, a soft, unguarded smile she hadn't felt in a long while. As the afternoon deepened, the light began to fade from bright gold to muted amber. The forest seemed to exhale, its energy slowing with the sun's descent. Hope picked up a fallen leaf and turned it over in her hands. It was shaped like a small flame, its edges tinged with red. "Even the trees let go," she murmured, echoing her thoughts from earlier. The words hung in the air for a moment before the wind carried them away. A gentle peace settled over her then, not the fragile kind that breaks when disturbed, but something deeper, steadier. The kind of peace that came from realizing she didn't have to fix anything or be anywhere else. She could simply be here, under this oak, breathing with the forest. As the shadows lengthened, Hope leaned back and closed her eyes. The world around her hummed softly, a low song of rustling leaves and fading light. She felt the oak behind her, solid and patient. Somewhere nearby, an owl called, and a few early stars began to glimmer above the treetops. Hope smiled to herself, whispering, "I'm learning, slowly, but I'm learning." And the forest, in its ancient, wordless way, seemed to answer with a sigh of wind, a quiet acknowledgement that she was exactly where she needed to be. By the time twilight descended over the forest, the air had cooled into that perfect edge between day and night, when the world holds its breath before the stars awaken. The last beams of sunlight stretched across the trees, turning the forest floor into a sea of copper and rose. Hope sat by the stream she'd found earlier, her knees tucked beneath her blanket, watching the water catch the fading light. It shimmered like liquid fire before slipping back into darkness. The day had drifted away softly, almost like a sigh. She gathered a few dry twigs and small branches and began building a fire. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate. She had learned patience in these woods. Every spark that failed to catch, every small gust that snuffed out a flame, none of it frustrated her anymore. She struck the match again, and this time, a small flame bloomed in the hollow she had built. It danced with fragile grace, licking upward until it found strength. The firelight flickered across her face, painting it in golden shadow. Soon, the forest came alive with the sounds of night. Crickets chirped in a steady rhythm, and somewhere far away, an owl called, a long, mournful note that echoed through the trees. The air smelled of burning pine and damp earth. Hope leaned closer to the fire, rubbing her hands together for warmth. Her breath misted in the cool air as she watched the flames twist and curl, devouring the wood slowly, methodically. There was something mesmerizing about it, the way destruction and beauty existed in the same motion. She pulled her journal from her pack, flipping it open to a blank page. The light from the fire wasn't bright, but it was enough. Her pen moved slowly as she wrote, her words blending into the sounds of the forest. Today, I remembered how to be still. I think I'm learning how to listen again, not just to the world, but to myself. She paused, tapping the pen against her chin. The thought of listening to herself used to feel impossible. Back in the city, her thoughts had been buried beneath the noise, the constant vibration of her phone, the hum of machines, the endless chatter that filled every space. Silence had been a stranger, something she avoided. But now, here in this vast, breathing forest, silence felt like an old friend. Closing the journal, she laid it beside her and gazed upward. The sky was deepening into indigo. Stars began to appear one by one, tiny, trembling sparks scattered across the dark. She tried to count them but lost track quickly. They were too many, too vast. For a moment, she felt small in the best possible way, not insignificant, but connected, as though her heartbeat was part of the rhythm that kept the world alive. A gentle wind passed through the clearing, stirring the flames and rustling the leaves overhead. The trees swayed, whispering to one another. Hope listened, smiling faintly. She could almost imagine them speaking, not in words, but in memories. Centuries of stories carried in the movement of branches, in the sigh of wind through their roots. She lay back on the blanket, hands folded across her chest, staring into the canopy above. The stars were reflected in the stream beside her, tiny mirrors of the sky. For a long while, she did nothing but breathe, in time with the soft rhythm of the forest around her. The crickets, the water, the crackle of fire, all of it blended into one sound, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. Her eyelids grew heavier with every passing minute. The warmth from the fire wrapped around her like a second blanket. Somewhere nearby, she heard the faint rustle of movement, maybe a fox, or the deer she had seen earlier. But there was no fear in her. The forest was no longer strange or wild. It was home, even if only for tonight. She thought briefly of tomorrow. There was no plan, no map. She might walk farther into the woods, or she might stay. The idea of uncertainty no longer scared her. The future would come when it wanted to, slow and quiet, like the dawn. For now, this moment was enough. As the fire burned lower, Hope turned on her side, watching the last embers pulse in the dark. They glowed like tiny hearts, fading gently with every breath. "Thank you," she whispered into the night, not to anyone in particular, but to everything. The trees, the stars, the wind, the earth. The silence after her words felt like an answer, soft, tender, and alive. Her eyes closed, and the world began to blur. The forest wrapped her in its slow, steady heartbeat. The last thing she felt before sleep took her was the gentle vibration of the earth beneath her, deep, eternal, peaceful. Hope dreamed of light, of leaves falling in slow motion, of water glimmering beneath endless sky, of her own laughter echoing through the trees. And though the fire died before morning came, its warmth lingered inside her. When dawn would return, As it always did, she would wake not as the woman who came here to escape, but as someone who had remembered how to be. The forest had taught her what the world had made her forget, that peace isn't found by running, but by stopping, by breathing, by letting life move as slowly and beautifully as autumn itself.